So last time we talked about the four ingredients. We said that there's going to be financial crisis, the unfit king, the Estates General, and the National Assembly. Here's where we're going to lay those out. We need to make sure that we understand how bad things were in France and the fact that Louis was not taking care of the nation's finances. In fact, Louis really loved the good life rather than what he loved about governing. He was enjoying the palace and enjoying palace life so much. Plus the fact that France had been involved in a number of wars. And those wars required the king to find money to help pay for them. And it was one of those things where it's not all Louis's fault because he didn't make the decision to go into some of those other wars, but it was the fault of those who had been ruling before him and then Louis's lack of understanding of how to fix that problem. And it was not a problem that you could just ignore and assume that it was going to go away. And so when he looked at the national budget, he saw the fact that they owed a lot of money for those wars. His best solution was then to go and tax the people. We saw that with the simulation we did in class where we went and heavily taxed the third estate and we didn't tax the first and the second estate very much. Well, on top of that, we also have the problem of a famine, and that famine caused a rise in bread prices. And because of that, that created more hunger, more discontent, malnutrition, especially among the lower class and the poor, and they had nowhere to turn. And then on top of that, the government continued to tax them, even when they had nothing. And so these repressive taxes were very, very difficult for the poor to climb out of their situation, and they viewed the world as hopeless. And most of that tax burden was placed on the poor, and the wealthy, the nobility, as well as the clergy and the church paid very little taxes and didn't experience the same hardships as the majority of the lower middle class. We also mentioned Louis as an unsuitable monarch. Louis XVI here was very indecisive. It was almost as if he was just choosing to float through life, as if he didn't have a care in the world, as if he didn't understand his responsibility and his role in helping France to recover. And I think there's an important lesson here for us to think about as we are maturing, as we are growing in our relationship here as, for most of you sophomores, how are you hitting your goals that you are trying to accomplish in life? Hopefully you have them. Hopefully you have goals of things that you want to do and things that you want to get done, and then have a plan on how you're going to accomplish those things. And for Louis, I think it was one of those things that he just believed that, oh, I'm the king, and so I can do whatever I want. And nobody's going to stop me, nobody's going to make me, and I don't have to worry about the consequences. And that's important for you to learn a lesson from Louis and believe that there are consequences to your actions and there are consequences to what you do on a daily basis. And you earn a reputation and you earn the grades you get, you earn the money that you get for a job or the lack thereof. And if you don't put in the work, you don't put in the effort, you're not going to get the results that you hope for. And surely if you don't have goals and if you don't have aspirations to accomplish something, then you're never going to know whether you've achieved those or not, and you're just going to be floating through life. So let's be careful about that. Let's make sure that we are constantly maturing, not only in our academics and our schoolwork, but also in our relationship with God. And make sure that we are not allowing ourselves just to sit back and float along and let day by day pass without spending time in prayer, without spending time in God's Word, because we're not going to see progress, we're not going to see results if that's the case. Now, let's get back to Louis here for a moment. He really has no interest in growing as a man. He has no interest in maturing. He has no interest in the details of governing. And so he decides to leave that up to somebody else. And so one of the people that he allows to help make decisions for him is Marie Antoinette. She was an Austrian archduchess, and she was married to Louis when she was only 15 years old. It was somewhat of an arranged marriage, and she really loved living the good life, and she loved to help make financial decisions for Louis. Most of them were not good for the country. Most of them were good for the royal family and good for herself. And she earned the nickname here, Madame Deficit, because of her very extravagant lifestyle and the way that she spent money, the way that she put things together. She had incredible taste and incredible flair for money and flair for good stuff, but yet it wasn't something that was good for the country. And when the country was in poverty and a lot of the people were starving and hungry and didn't know where to turn, they saw her wearing some of the best clothing and eating the best food and having parties, and it didn't seem fair. So for that reason, she was very unpopular among the middle and lower class. And many times she actually interfered in the politics, and she got involved where she really shouldn't have been and made things worse for Louis. Now, for Louis himself, he was 19 and he was very smart, albeit very young when he took the throne ahead of him. And a lot of people thought that he was going to do a great job taking over the throne. But unfortunately, he was indecisive. And because he couldn't make a strong decision, because he was weak anytime somebody opposed him, he would often cave into making a decision he really didn't want to make. But he was a very popular man among the people. He was well liked because he always told people what they wanted to hear. And so because he never gave them bad news, never told them what he really needed to tell them, he did get a lot of popularity among the people. Unfortunately, his marriage had some rocky moments. He felt as if he was being used for his power, that Marie Antoinette was simply just with him because he was the king, not because she really loved him. And some of that may have been true. Now, it's important that we understand the Estates General. So we simulated this a little bit in class. We know that the first estate is the clergy. They do not ever pay taxes because they're associated with the Catholic Church. We also have the nobility as the second estate. Most of them were either related to royalty or were very wealthy in and of themselves. And then we have the big group of people. We have the third estate. This is a very wide range of different groups of people, anywhere from business owners who are doing fairly well for themselves, but wouldn't quite be up to the nobility stage, all the way down to the very lowest poor working class. And so in this, we actually have two different groups that are formed. There's a bourgeoisie. They are the middle class, somewhat wealthy group of people. And then we have the proletarians, and this is the very low, very low income, almost the peasant aspect of society. And so most of the third estate was the ones who are carrying the heavy tax burden. But then Louis realized that there's not enough money there to be able to fix the country's tax issues, so he decides that he's going to try to tax the second estate in order to get them out of debt. And that is not going to go over very well. That is going to bring together a meeting here of the Estates General. Now, the Estates General had not met for, I think, was 150 years. And the Estates General was somewhere back in 100, 200 years ago that it was part of the French government, but it was not really used. It was meant to be an advisory council to the king. And yet, the king had really never called this together. Well, in this case, the nobility decided to call this meeting because of the fact that they wanted to discuss this heavy taxation. And the third estate's saying, whoa, hey, yeah, we've been taxed way too long, and we need to do something about this. Nobility are not really interested in helping the third estate out. They just want to help themselves. But you can see by the graphic here on the screen, the composition of France, the fact that you've got 1 or 2% that belong to that first estate. You've got 3 to 5% belonging to the second estate. And then you have 93 to 96% belonging to that third estate. And so the masses of people want to see change, and yet they have very little power to do so. There's a couple of political cartoons here that I want you to assess, and I want you to take a look at here. And ask you a couple of questions here on the screen. What do you think the picture is portraying to the viewer? Look at what techniques the artist used to convey the information. How would you feel if you remember the third estate? Do you think that political cartoons like this would help to spur a revolution, and why? And so take a look at the picture and the image here, and I will pull this off here for just a moment. That way you can take a look at the image in its entirety. So take a look at the image and analyze those questions here. pause the video, and then I'm going to talk through them. So hopefully you wrote some things down. We've got a few people up here that are represented. On the picture on the left, you've got the third estate down there at the bottom being crushed beneath the first and second estate. And then on the picture on the right, you have the third estate who is in chains, who looks as if he's about ready to pass out, about ready to die. And you have up there the king as well as the first and second estate members who are literally riding their backs, trying to help keep the country alive. And I think it's important that we understand the vast difference between each of these estates before we move on.